Dave Hester once ruled storage wars with a single word, yup. But behind the loud bids and viral moments was a man spiraling, silently, painfully. From lawsuits and industry blacklisting to a stroke that nearly ended everything, this is the story of how reality TV's biggest villain became its most tragic figure. And now, after vanishing for nearly a decade, he's coming back. But not for glory, for survival. When Storage Wars first hit television screens in December 2010, it didn't take long for one voice to rise above the rest. That voice belonged to Dave Hester, a fast-talking, no-nonsense auction hunter whose signature catchphrase, yup, was impossible to ignore. He shouted it with a confidence that bordered on theatrical, injecting a jolt of energy into every bid. And just like that, reality TV had found its newest villain. But this wasn't just a man with a loud voice. Hester had the instincts of a seasoned buyer and the aggression of a cornered animal. Week after week, he dominated auctions, outbid rivals, and made headlines, not for what he found in the storage units, but for the way he tore through the competition. The public was drawn to him, even if they didn't necessarily like him. He was confrontational, cunning, and unrelenting, and his every move was broadcast to millions. His brand, too, grew just as fast. The word yup began to appear on hats, shirts, mugs, even the side of his delivery truck. It was more than a catchphrase, it was a brand identity, and Dave Hester knew how to market it. In a matter of months, he became the most talked about figure on the show. Some viewers rooted for him, others watched just to see who he'd clash with next. Either way, they tuned in. Behind the scenes, though, there was already tension building. Hester wasn't just a man with a gimmick, he was a businessman with ambitions that didn't always align with the network's scripted chaos. And while audiences were laughing, cheering, or cringing at his every outburst, Hester himself was starting to question the machinery that kept him in the spotlight. Because as one former production assistant later put it, Dave wasn't acting, that's who he really was, and that scared people. But the louder the catchphrase echoed across America, the more it masked what was quietly unraveling behind the cameras. And soon, Hester's reality TV empire would be tested, not by rivals in the auction house, but by the very network that made him famous. Coming up next, the hidden manipulations behind the scenes and the lawsuit that turned reality TV into a courtroom battlefield. Let me know when you're ready for Section 2, Manufactured Mayhem Behind the Cameras.
For millions of viewers, Storage Wars was chaotic fun. Bidders shouting over rusted lockers, surprise finds worth thousands, and rivalries that made every episode feel like a small war. But according to court documents and insider accounts, the reality on screen was often anything but real. In December 2012, Dave Hester dropped a bombshell. He filed a $750,000 lawsuit against A&E and Original Productions, accusing the network of staging and manipulating key elements of the show. At the center of his claims was a shocking allegation. Producers had been salting storage units, strategically placing valuable items like vintage cars, rare antiques, and even memorabilia from the day Elvis Presley died to fabricate suspense and boost ratings. To the public, these units appeared to be random treasure troves, but Hester alleged that producers were carefully orchestrating the drama, crafting emotional arcs, and deciding winners long before the auctioneer's hammer fell. According to his legal filing, even some of the cast members' bids, wins, and reactions were edited or reshot to heighten conflict. It didn't stop there. Hester claimed that weaker cast members were given financial help, storage units paid for by the network to level the playing field on screen. Perhaps most disturbing was an allegation that a female cast member had undergone plastic surgery funded by the producers to enhance her TV appeal. It was the kind of behind-the-scenes accusation that painted a dark picture of reality TV's thirst for spectacle at any cost. The producers didn't take the allegations lightly. In response, A&E argued that Storage Wars was not a game show or a regulated competition, but a form of creative expression protected under the First Amendment. Their counter was swift and brutal. They labeled the lawsuit a desperate cry following failed contract negotiations. But for many industry insiders, Hester's lawsuit wasn't entirely surprising. Whispers about behind-the-scenes scripting and manipulated storage units had circulated in production circles for years. What made this case different was that it came from one of the show's stars, a man who had been central to the very drama he now exposed. And while some dismissed him as bitter or opportunistic, others saw Hester's move as brave. He wasn't just breaking the fourth wall, he was tearing it down. Still, the lawsuit marked a turning point in his career. In speaking out, Hester didn't just attack the show, he isolated himself from it. Within weeks, he was fired. Next up, fired from the show, burdened by legal fees, and cast out from the spotlight, Dave Hester begins his most difficult chapter yet. By the time the lawsuit hit headlines, Dave Hester was no longer just a TV personality. He had become a lightning rod for controversy. The $750,000 legal battle he launched in late 2012 wasn't just about money. It was about integrity, retaliation, and the true cost of pulling back the curtain on one of reality television's most watched shows. In the complaint, Hester accused A&E and Original Productions of firing him for speaking out, claiming that his dismissal was retaliation for refusing to stay silent about the show's manipulated content. He pointed to the Communications Act of 1934, a decades-old law that prohibits rigging outcomes in competitions broadcast over the air. In his view, Storage Wars had crossed the line by faking outcomes while maintaining the illusion of authenticity. The allegations ignited a firestorm in the media. For a moment, Hester wasn't just a loudmouth bidder, he was a whistleblower, a man taking on the entire infrastructure of reality television. News outlets ran contrasting headlines: Storage Wars rigged versus Star sues out of spite. Supporters praised him for exposing what they believed was a known but unspoken truth. Critics accused him of using the lawsuit to leverage better contract terms. A&E countered swiftly, dismissing the claims as sour grapes after failed negotiations. Their legal team leaned hard on the First Amendment, describing the show as entertainment, not a legitimate contest. They argued that even if scenes were enhanced or manipulated, it fell within the realm of creative license. It wasn't fraud, it was show business. As the case moved through the courts, the line between fact and fiction blurred even more. In March 2013, the court partially sided with A&E, dismissing Hester's unfair competition claims. But the wrongful termination portion of the lawsuit was allowed to continue. That meant more legal fees, more media coverage, and more personal exposure than Hester may have anticipated. Then came the financial blow. The judge ordered Hester to pay $122,000 in A&E's legal fees, a sum that would cripple most small businesses. For a man used to shouting "yup" at life's opportunities, this ruling might as well have been a giant nope. The once confident mogul was now on the ropes. In the public eye, his role had shifted from villain to victim, and then to something more complicated: a fallen figure caught in a legal war he couldn't afford to keep fighting. But this wouldn't be the end. In a twist nobody saw coming, the very network that once cut him loose would soon welcome him back, with open cameras but cold shoulders. By mid-2014, after nearly 2 years of courtroom tension, the legal battle between Dave Hester and A&E came to a quiet close. The two parties reached an out-of-court settlement. The details were never made public, but one thing was clear: Hester hadn't won, at least not in the way he hoped. He was still reeling from the court order to pay $122,000 in the network's legal fees, a blow that, for someone running a small business, was far more than just a financial inconvenience. It was a gut punch. Yet, in an ironic twist worthy of scripted drama, the very man who sued the network returned to the show just 1 month after the settlement. Season 5 of Storage Wars aired in August 2014, and there he was, Dave Hester, standing at the auction block like nothing had happened. But things had changed. Everything had changed. Gone were the grand entrances, the social media fanfare, the aura of dominance. Hester's return wasn't met with celebration. It was met with silence. Fans were divided. Some admired his willingness to return to a show he had publicly criticized. Others saw it as hypocrisy. How could the man who decried the system now quietly rejoin it? Inside the cast, the atmosphere was even colder. Former allies kept their distance. Co-stars who once engaged in loud, playful sparring now avoided him altogether. In group scenes, he was often on the sidelines. Off-camera, insiders say production teams had to work around cast members' requests to minimize shared screen time with Hester. What followed was a string of awkward, tension-filled appearances from season 5 through season 12. Hester was back, but the magic was gone. That energy that once made him a centerpiece now felt forced. There were fewer memorable clashes, fewer bids that stirred the audience. His image had been tarnished by the lawsuit, and it showed. From a TV network's point of view, Hester's return may have been about ratings or damage control, but for him, it looked more like survival. His Yup brand had lost momentum. Merchandise sales reportedly dipped. Business partners pulled away. And with no solid ground outside the show, he returned to the very stage he once tried to tear down. In a bitter irony, Dave Hester, the man who once declared legal war on Storage Wars, was now back on its payroll, not as a defiant crusader, but as a diminished presence, a cautionary figure, a necessary compromise. Coming next, behind the scenes, Hester's health was quietly crumbling until a devastating stroke nearly ended everything. While viewers saw Dave Hester return to Storage Wars with his trademark glare and relentless bidding, few realized just how much he was physically deteriorating behind the scenes. The man, once known for dominating auctions with brute confidence, was now quietly fighting a far more personal battle, one that no camera crew could edit out. By 2015, eagle-eyed fans had begun to notice something wasn't right. Hester looked swollen, sluggish, and out of breath in multiple episodes. His movements were slower. His temper, once explosive and sharp, began to falter, sometimes replaced with uncharacteristic fatigue or confusion. It was easy to write off as aging or stress, but those who knew what to look for saw the warning signs: high blood pressure, unchecked exhaustion, and the telltale symptoms of sleep apnea, a condition he had long ignored. Then, in 2018, it all came crashing down. Hester suffered a massive stroke, a cerebral hemorrhage that nearly ended his life. According to hospital records, later confirmed in a brief family statement, the stroke was triggered by a dangerous mix of elevated blood pressure and untreated sleep apnea. He was rushed into emergency surgery as doctors scrambled to relieve swelling in his brain and restore oxygen flow. For days, his condition was critical. For months, he remained in intensive rehabilitation. The man who once ruled the auction floor with bravado could no longer walk without assistance. He had to relearn basic motor functions, memory skills, and even parts of his speech. In one of his only public statements after the event, Hester admitted he thought he wasn't going to make it. His return to the spotlight, already shaky, was now on indefinite pause. The stroke didn't just leave physical scars. It marked the end of any illusions of a comeback. Hester, the TV star, the public villain, the controversial whistleblower, was gone. In his place was a man forced to reevaluate everything: his health, his work, his future. Some of the signs had been there all along. Old episodes began circulating online, with viewers pointing out moments where Hester appeared disoriented or short-tempered, especially under pressure. In hindsight, many saw those moments not as dramatic television, but as cries for help. His health crisis didn't make headlines the way his lawsuit had, but it was arguably the most defining moment of his life. A stark reminder that no amount of money, branding, or TV exposure can protect a person from the consequences of pushing too hard for too long. Next, as Hester recovers behind closed doors, his once mighty brand collapses, his business shrinks, and his public presence nearly vanishes. The stroke may have marked the end of Dave Hester's television dominance, but what followed was something even more sobering: a slow, painful collapse of everything he had built around his name. The Yup brand that once boomed across merchandise aisles and auction houses began to fade quietly into the background, with fewer appearances, fewer promotions, and fewer believers in the myth he had cultivated. Before his health crisis, Hester had managed to parlay his fame into a tidy side business. Baseball caps, t-shirts, mugs, all stamped with his infamous catchphrase, lined online stores. For a while, the merchandise moved fast. Fans wanted a piece of the chaos, a souvenir from TV's most combative bidder, but that momentum didn't last. After the lawsuit and during his scattered reappearances on Storage Wars, sales began to dip. What had once been a symbol of boldness and rebellion started to feel stale, like a punchline that had overstayed its welcome. The stroke only accelerated the decline. Without a steady public presence, there was no one left to sell the brand. Sponsors noticed, so did business partners. One by one, opportunities dried up. Promotional events were quietly canceled. Licensing deals went cold. Even his thrift store, once dubbed rags to riches to reflect his personal journey, faced declining foot traffic and growing expenses. With fewer options, Hester shifted focus to a scaled-down version of what he knew best: auctions. But not the kind with camera crews and six-figure storage lockers. These were small-scale events: local warehouse liquidations, estate sales, community storage bids, the kind of auctions that happened in metal sheds with folding chairs and styrofoam coffee cups. By 2019, Dave Hester Auctions had become a modest operation. He was back to the basics: a microphone, a clipboard, and a small crowd. Gone were the dramatic face-offs, the national fan base, the viral gifs. What remained was a man stripped of the spotlight, trying to salvage what he could from the business model that had once made him a star. To his credit, Hester never publicly complained. He didn't chase headlines. He didn't beg for sympathy. He just kept showing up, quietly. As Dave Hester's public appearances dwindled, so did his presence in the digital world. Once a regular fixture on social media, promoting auctions, posting behind-the-scenes photos, and selling his now fading Yup merchandise, Hester gradually went silent. The shift was slow but unmistakable, and it raised questions that went far beyond his business or health. In 2012, during the peak of his legal fight with A&E, fans noticed something troubling. Hester's posts on Twitter and Facebook became increasingly erratic: cryptic messages, confusing rants, and sudden deletions. At first, many chalked it up to stress. After all, he was battling one of the biggest cable networks in America. But others suspected something deeper: mental exhaustion, perhaps, or the toll of years living in the artificial pressure cooker of reality television. By 2015, Hester's tone had changed completely. Gone were the promotional jabs or proud auction wins. In their place, vague updates and extended absences. By 2018, after his stroke, his social media went nearly dark. What few posts remained were sterile: photos of auction items, generic event reminders, no personal commentary, no interaction with fans. The man who once weaponized his personality now seemed intent on erasing it. His withdrawal didn't stop with the public. Behind the scenes, Hester's family life also retreated from the spotlight. He is married to Donna Hester and has a son, Dave Jr., but neither has made any public appearances or statements since his health crisis. In fact, there are no known recent photos of them together. No red carpets, no interviews, no posts. For someone who once embraced the chaos of reality TV, Hester's new strategy was clear: disappear. Friends close to the family say the decision was intentional. After years of controversy, courtrooms, and collapsing health, privacy had become a priority. The Hesters chose to close ranks, keeping medical recovery and emotional healing strictly within their inner circle. But to fans and the public, it felt like a vanishing act. No farewell, no reflection, just silence. And in that silence, speculation grew. Was he suffering from depression? Had the years of confrontation and backlash broken something inside him? Without confirmation or comment, all the public had were rumors and the unmistakable emptiness where a once loud voice had been. Coming up next, despite his retreat, Hester's legal battles weren't over, and when he reemerged, it wasn't for fame, but for survival. Even in the shadows, Dave Hester couldn't escape the weight of his past. Just when it seemed he had disappeared from the public eye for good, a new legal skirmish pulled his name back into the spotlight, albeit a dimmer one. In 2022, Hester found himself at the center of another lawsuit, this time filed against Public Storage, one of the largest self-storage companies in the United States. The case? A breach of contract. Hester alleged that the company had failed to honor certain business terms during a private auction agreement. But unlike his fiery 2012 battle with A&E, this lawsuit didn't draw national headlines. In fact, outside of a few court-watch blogs and trade forums, it barely registered. And that silence said a lot. This wasn't a headline-grabbing media war. This was a man, stripped of celebrity, just trying to keep his business afloat. Court documents show the case lacked solid evidence and was quickly dismissed. But to those paying attention, the lawsuit was less about winning and more about staying in the game. Financial pressure had returned, and it was pressing hard. Back on the auction floor, Hester returned to his roots. Gone were the production crews, the makeup chairs, the scripted rivalries. In their place, plastic folding tables, local warehouses, and hand-drawn item lists. Auctions were now intimate, often held in modest rental halls or backlots in Southern California. No fans, no noise, just bidders and boxes. Attendees described the atmosphere as subdued. He was professional but quiet, said one regular bidder who encountered Hester at a 2023 estate sale in Riverside. No yelling, no yup, just business. Another attendee recalled seeing him working solo, setting up the auction, managing the paperwork, and handling payments by himself. No assistants, no entourage. He was, once again, just another man in the business of buying and selling used goods. But something had changed. Hester wasn't chasing fame anymore. He wasn't trying to rebuild a brand or resurrect a persona. He was simply surviving, grinding through small auctions, trying to outlast the chaos that once defined him. And yet, the weight of his television past never fully left. For every quiet bidder in the crowd, there was always one person who whispered, "Is that the guy from Storage Wars?" Yes, it was. But it wasn't the same man. Coming up next, in a movie. After years of silence, scaled-down auctions, and fading public memory, Dave Hester's name surfaced once again. But this time, it wasn't in a courtroom or hospital report. In early 2025, A&E confirmed that Hester would be returning to Storage Wars for its highly anticipated 16th season, set to air on June 7. The announcement came with no flashy trailer, no dramatic interview, just a quiet confirmation buried in a press release. But for longtime fans, it was a thunderclap. Why now? Why him? And more importantly, why again? Reactions were swift and divided. For nostalgic fans who remembered the early seasons, the news felt like a return to form. "The old mogul is back," one user posted online. "Maybe Storage Wars will finally feel like Storage Wars again." But not everyone was thrilled. A louder, more skeptical crowd questioned the motive behind the move. Was it really about giving Hester a second chance? Or was it a calculated gamble to inject controversy and viewership into a show long past its prime? Industry insiders say A&E has been struggling to retain audience numbers in a post-pandemic media landscape crowded with streaming options and short-form content. Reviving one of the most controversial figures in the show's history could be a last-ditch effort to spark renewed interest. Hester, for all his flaws, still had name recognition. He was still the guy viewers love to hate. But others suspect a more personal reason for the return. Money? With legal fees, declining business revenue, and years of reduced income after his health crisis, sources close to Hester say he may have had few other options. "This isn't about ego anymore," one former crew member told us. "It's survival." What viewers will see in season 16 remains to be determined. Will Hester return in full villain mode, clashing with rivals, shouting bids, and wielding the infamous yup? Or will he show up quieter, more reserved, a man altered by age, illness, and public scrutiny? A&E has not commented on how prominently he'll feature in the new season, but teasers suggest he won't be center stage. Instead, he may be positioned as a legacy character, a callback to the show's golden years, more symbol than star. And that, perhaps, is the most telling sign of all. Dave Hester hasn't vanished, but he also hasn't truly returned, not as the force he once was. His reappearance on Storage Wars feels less like a triumphant comeback and more like a closing loop, a final chapter in a long, controversial story. Up next, after all the lawsuits, the losses, and the medical scares, what remains of Dave Hester? And what does his story tell us about the true price of reality TV fame? As the 16th season of Storage Wars prepares to roll out, Dave Hester's name once again appears in the credits. But for those who have followed his rise and fall, the bigger story lies not in his return, but in everything he had to lose to get here. This is a man who once dominated television screens with nothing more than a shout and a stare, who turned a single syllable, yup, into a brand, a persona, and, briefly, a cultural phenomenon. Yet behind that confident glare was a reality far more fragile, legal battles that drained him, a stroke that nearly killed him, and a reputation so polarizing it alienated the very fans who once made him famous. Now, Hester walks back into the world of reality television as a shadow of his former self. Not forgotten, but no longer feared. Not erased, but no longer celebrated. His brand is diminished, his finances, by all accounts, have been stretched thin, his family remains private, his voice mostly silent. And maybe that's the most haunting truth of all. In an industry built on spectacle, conflict, and illusion, Dave Hester played the perfect villain. But when the camera stopped rolling, the cost became all too real. The debt of fame isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in what you sacrifice to keep the spotlight on. So, what's left? A man who once sold forgotten treasures from storage units now finds himself becoming one. Not quite gone, but no longer wanted the way he once was. His story remains a warning wrapped in bravado, a reminder that in reality television, the realest pain often happens off-screen. Still, some might say it's not over, that as long as he shows up, auction list in hand, eyes locked on the next bid, there's a part of him that refuses to disappear completely. Maybe Hester's return is just business, or maybe, in some strange way, it's one last attempt to reclaim the identity he spent a decade building. But whether this final chapter ends in redemption or just a ratings boost, one thing is certain: Dave Hester's story will outlast the series that made him famous. Because for better or worse, he's no longer just a character